Okay, everybody, this is our December chapter meeting. I'm going to be chairing because Anne is still indisposed. Although she's doing much better, she's now in rehab, and so she's progressing nicely. Um, if you'd like to send her your best wishes, you could just do that by sending an email to our email account, which is retirees@pscmail.org. And then Bonnie will forward them to her. Okay. As you know, we're going to be doing residential living and care arrangements for seniors, part two. And Jim Cohen will be speaking to us today. He did part one in April of 2024. So I'm just going to give you a little. Well, many of you have been there for that. I'm just going to give you a little introduction to Jim, which I learned some things about Jim that I didn't know from this introduction. Jim and I serve on the PSC Pensions Committee, but I didn't know a couple of things here. So let me just tell you something about him. Between 1975 and 1983, I didn't know this, Jim had done some other union work. He's been doing this for quite a while. He worked for the Civil Service Employees Association and the American Federation of State and County Municipal Employees, doing policy and budget analysis and political action in New York State. In 1983 to 1985, he worked on the Labor Management Committee for New York City Transit. In 1985, he was hired at John Jay for under the Public Management Department, and most of his academic research was about the financial history of urban mass transportation and French and American railroads. He's currently a professor emeritus from John Jay. He also served in John Jay for 2 terms as the chapter chair, along with Bonnie Nelson on the executive committee. He right now is a current member of the pension committee, as I mentioned, with us. And he's also a member of our chapter, which is great to hear from our members. Jim started doing research on living and care arrangements for seniors about 4 years ago as part of his work for an informal study group on aging. He did this along with Florence Tager, Nan Brower Maglin, Mary Gibson, and June Jacobson. He's also, which I appreciate, a dedicated gardener. He currently has a project where he is redesigning, restructuring, and reshaping his garden as a type of land art. Maybe you can come and give me some tips on my puny little garden out in front of my house, Jim. He lives in Inwood, the Inwood neighborhood of Upper Manhattan, with his partner Mary Gibson, Professor Emerita of History at John Jay and the Graduate Center. So, with no further ado, let me turn it over to Jim. All yours, Jim. You have to unmute.
There.
There you go.
Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Hello, everybody. First, some quick housekeeping background. Um, Jessica and Bonnie think we may be able to have you raise your hands in the Zoom, the way you do it in Zoom, where you put your hand up and say how many people attending today attended my first presentation in April of 2024. Is there a way to people to put up their hands and we can see how many that is? Bonnie, you want to step in and tell people what to do, or Jessica?
They're doing it. Let's see.
You can go
22,
to React and there you can raise your hand. So far, 26 people have.
20, 29, 30.
30.
That doesn't mean we remember it.
We're up to 30-ish.
Okay.
Okay. Then I'm assuming that most of the rest of you that are here today missed that presentation. It's relevant to today's presentation, but not crucial for understanding today's presentation. However, if you want to know what I did back in April of 2024, there's a link to the whole presentation on the retirees chapter website. So you can literally listen to me doing that. And there's also going to be, within a few days, if I'm correct, Bonnie and Jessica, correct me if I'm wrong, or Diane, we're going to have the key tables from that 2024 presentation, which you may find it useful to look at. They deal in very briefly in 2024. What I did was give a overview of the landscape of living and care arrangements for seniors that exists in the United States, focusing even more on the New York City area. And I talked largely about the costs and benefits of those living and care arrangements. And I did a lot of research, and Bonnie was very helpful in it about, for example, whether you can use Medicaid to fund certain things, how much it costs to go into certain places, what it costs to have home health aides come into your home or apartment. It was very much focused on that broad terrain, and then on the cost aspects. Today, I'm going to do something that takes off from that. I'll tell you about that, but first let me say a few thank yous to the following. The Retiree Chapter Executive Committee, Anne, Bonnie, Diane, Irwin, for inviting me to do this follow-up. Someone said to me recently, it's important at our age to have something bigger than oneself to make us feel alive. And it's been very helpful to me personally to have this to do. So I thank the executive committee for inviting me, and there are others on that committee. Specifically, I know Bob Cermelli and I have talked about this stuff a lot. Jessica Verone, PSC staff, have been helpful on this a lot in terms of the technical angle, and she's going to be crucial to me making this work today. Diane mentioned the study group on aging with Nan Bauer Maglin, Florence Tager, Mary Gibson, who are retiree chapter members, and then a non-CUNY person, June Jacobson. They've been very helpful to me, and I thank them. I did a very early run through of this with them. People in the chapter, people here today and in the first presentation, a lot of people sent me thank yous and made little comments, and I feel guilty I didn't respond individually. But I thank all of them for doing that. It was very nice to hear from a lot of people that they liked or commented in certain ways on that first presentation. And finally, far too many friends and relatives to name here with whom I've discussed this material that I'm going to be going over today. Okay, basta. Onward and upward. I have good news and bad news to bring to you. The good news is, as the fact that we're here today indicates, is we're living longer. Advances in healthcare, vaccines, diet, Social Security, Medicare, a whole lot of other factors helping this along. The bad news is we're living longer, but in a country where the federal government doesn't do much to, doesn't nearly invest nearly enough in senior living and care. And the G7 countries of advanced industrial democracies, we rank 6th out of 7th in GDP expenditures on long-term care. On the other hand, there is other good news. We have many types of living and care arrangements to choose from. including assisted living, which I'm going to talk about a lot today. It's a relatively new type of arrangement dating only to really the 90s. It started in the 80s. And we have continuing care retirement communities that combine all types of living and care arrangements together in one campus. On the other hand, the development of most living and care arrangements in this country historically has been dominated by the private sector, by the so-called free market. And I have serious concerns about that, which I'll talk about today. And finally, good and bad, we're old, or I am. And for a lot of people I've talked to, everything seems harder, takes longer. It's harder to take care of our to-do lists. Life feels more difficult. We're losing friends and relatives. Other friends and relatives are sick, have mobility problems, dementia. Some of us are lonely. Um, uh, and some of us, frankly, people I've interviewed and talked to and know would like to be able to end our lives before illness ends it for us in maybe not the most enjoyable setting. But we don't have the right to die in this country. We do not have the right to decide when, if and when we would like our lives to end. My objective today is to provide you with information that'll help you deal with the challenges of making decisions about if you want to make decisions about leaving your current living and care arrangement, which is probably living at home for most of you right now. Jessica, if you could put up the outline, I'll show you how I'm going to go about that. So as I say, my objective is to try to give you handles so that you can come away at the end of this with a better understanding of some key aspects of living and care arrangements that might help you to decide amongst them if you ever want to make that decision. What happened to the outline? There it is. Okay. So I'll do that by first talking about some terminology. Then I say a brief history. No, Jessica, go back up to page 1. I'll talk about some terminology. I say a brief history. Actually, it's going to be a 15 or 20-minute history of living and care arrangements, which I think is really helpful. And then a little more about how they continue to unfold, and then really dig into how to make choices among the various living and care arrangements, trying to give you some handles, some criteria, something to hang your hat on if and when you are making decisions in this regard. And then concluding remarks. Terminology, Jessica, page 2 of the outline. So, living and care arrangements, I'm going to tell you what I mean by that. It's my preferred phrase for talking about this whole terrain that we're in, because it emphasizes that we need both a place to live and, when the time comes, some care, some help. So it's the most inclusive term. But I'll also be using the word facility or facilities, which is where a lot of living and care takes place, such as a nursing home, an assisted living facility, a continuing care retirement community. Another term is long-term care. In the literature, research, articles, this sector of the economy is often called the long-term care sector. I think it's called that because it's to contrast it with short-term acute care in a hospital or in a rehab facility. Ironically, regrettably, it's a somewhat misleading term since, sorry to say, a lot of us don't spend a long time usually in these facilities for reasons I don't need to go into, I think. Unless you go into one like a CCRC at a young age, which not too many people do. And then as I say on terminology, I'll be talking about a lot of companies, organizations that are sometimes termed nonprofit or not-for-profit and for-profit, I'll be talking about, and contrasting them. But I wanted to highlight nonprofit or not-for-profit. I'm going to use those interchangeably, even though technically and legally there are some significant differences, but they don't matter for today. Jessica, page 3 of the outline. So this is what is going to be this history I'm about to go into. I'm going to talk about the origins and the growth of nursing homes, then how assisted living is a possible reform over nursing homes, memory care, and CCRCs. Okay, Jessica, now you can take it down and I'll get on with this history. A little background. I've read a lot of books, not books, I've read a lot of book chapters, articles, looked at a lot of data about long-term care, the long-term care sector. I've interviewed a lot of people. I've visited a lot of facilities. And that's the material that I have used to prepare this presentation. But I'm not a historian of long-term care. I've done financial history in my career. So if anyone's in the audience is an expert and you see or hear mistakes I'm making in this history, especially, I will be happy to hear about that. Maybe I won't be happy, but please let me know. Okay. Back in the 19th and earliest 20th century, old people were generally taken care of at home by their relatives, or they could go into facilities called variously convalescent homes, rest homes, homes for the aged. Or if they were poor, they could end up in public facilities called poorhouses or almshouses, which were important organizations, but they were not great places. Poor conditions, unclean, overcrowded, poorly staffed, in large buildings generally, for the elderly poor. Until the New Deal and the Social Security Act. In the 1935 Social Security Act, the Old Age Assistance Program was funded. And in that program, the states could match federal money. And states could take that federal match and give it to private companies to develop facilities. They could not give it to they could not put it into public facilities because the idea was to reform poorhouses, which were public. And this was a way to get away from poorhouses and public. Later on, federal money can and state money can start going into public facilities. But originally in the New Deal, the idea was we're going to reform these old facilities, and so we're going to give it to the private sector. And that's how and those facilities that the private sector begins to develop in the 30s, 40s, and beyond come to be called nursing homes. And at the end of World War II, under Truman, the Hill-Burton Act is legislated and provides a lot of federal money for construction of new facilities, nursing homes, and renovation of old buildings that can become nursing homes. So there's a boom in nursing home construction in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, aided and abetted by a couple of things. One is a doubling of the elderly population in this country from 13 to 26 million between 1950 and 1980, and Medicaid in 65, which provided a steady source of income for developers, operators of living in care nursing homes, and then later other living in care arrangements. Here's some data on the growth of nursing homes. From 6,500 facilities in the early 50s, 16,000 in the 1970s, on a 150% increase. Between 1960 and 1976, a 300% increase in the number of beds, which is an even better measure of growth than number of facilities. 300% increase between 60 and 76 in the number of beds. And growth was concentrated in large, over 100 bed facilities. 250,000 people were in nursing homes in 1960. In 1980, 1.5 million people were in nursing homes. Just an important side note. Medicaid does not provide very liberal funding to operators of nursing homes or other living and care arrangements. So both public and nonprofit companies that are going to operate these facilities are tightly squeezed to generate revenue in excess of expenses. For the nursing home sector, that's meant as a broad generality that people are often often, maybe always, in shared rooms with relatively little private space and few amenities. And the food may not be great, and the facilities are often short-staffed. Also, the nursing home sector in its history has been tarnished by many scandals involving theft of Medicaid funds by owners, warehousing of residents, excessive use of drugs. I'll never forget the name Charles Hines. Back when I was working for AFSCME and CSEA, he did huge exposés of nursing homes in New York. And I don't remember a lot of names as well these days, but Hines's name immediately popped out when I was doing this preparing this presentation. On the other hand, not all nursing homes were or are bad. And I'd say especially facilities owned and operated by not-for-profits, by philanthropic and religious organizations. Hebrew Home for the Aged, for example, can and do a good job of caring for their housing and caring for their clientele. And I think it's a fair generalization to say that historically, nursing homes were a significant advance over poorhouses of the 19th and early 20th century. But there was a lot of dissatisfaction building about nursing homes, especially by the 1970s. And this is the origin of assisted living. Uh, two names are associated with the founding of assisted living as a kind of living and care arrangement. Karen Wilson on the West Coast, Paul and Terry Klassen on the East Coast. Wilson is a PhD gerontologist at Portland State University, or probably she's emeritus now, in Oregon. In the 70s, she had put her mother in a nursing home, which her mother hated and complained bitterly. Wilson wanted to find an alternative, but she couldn't find one. And as a gerontologist, she set out to develop an arrangement that would work for people like her mother. She wanted a building with a home-like atmosphere. She wanted a place where residents would have their own private room or apartment, where residents could be in a lounge with other residents, could be in a dining room with other residents, in a sitting area with other residents, where there'd be sufficient staff to take care of routine support of residents, and if necessary, to provide help with so-called activities of daily living, dressing, bathing, toileting, and more specialized nursing staff to deal with non-acute medical services, such as prescribing and administering medications and taking care of low-level illnesses. But Wilson faced, of course, the big conundrum: how do you finance this kind of an arrangement? She was fortunate in Oregon that there was inexpensive housing. And so she thought of supplementing Medicaid payments with self-pay. So she went to the state of Oregon. She got a waiver from the state that they would use Medicaid funds, part state, part federal. They'd use Medicaid funds for an assisted living facility that was not a nursing home, for a facility that was not a nursing home that came to be called assisted living. I don't actually know whether Wilson's mother got into one of these in time, but that was what Wilson had in mind. She went on to develop a company and a whole bunch of these facilities, mostly on the West Coast. They serve a mix of Medicaid and self-paying residents. They're owned and operated both by not-for-profits and by for-profit organizations. Her original organization was for-profit. Meanwhile, on the East Coast, something very similar happened. Paul and Terry Klassen in Virginia, they opened a facility there. Then they opened a couple of more facilities. Then in 1987, they got an architect to design an entirely new building that looks like a Victorian mansion. Jessica, can you put up that slide number 5 from April 2024? This is what Klassen developed. Sunrise Senior, his company he developed too a private company. It became called Sunrise Senior Living. And this is a Victorian style of facility, of building. Okay, Jessica, you can take that down. Thanks. By 2006, Sunrise had developed over 400 facilities across the US, assisted living facilities. Their clientele is largely upper middle class and white, people who can afford to self-pay for assisted living. Only a small proportion of the residents rely on Medicaid. Assisted living was broadly popular from the outset. It spread rapidly across the country. Hyatt hotels, Marriott hotels, all sorts of other private operators got into it big time. Nonprofits got into it, especially non-secular organizations affiliated with the Presbyterian Church, Lutherans, Baptists, Catholics, Jews, all developed assisted living facilities. In 1998, when the first data becomes valid data on assisted living, there were 11,000 facilities with over 600,000 beds. 2015, 1 million licensed assisted living beds in almost 30,000 facilities. Since 2015, because of COVID in significant measure, but maybe other factors, growth has been less dramatic. But now, as of last year's data, 1.2 million licensed beds, 32,000 assisted living facilities, most of which, 82% for-profit, 18% not-for-profit. As you might imagine, a lot of people going into assisted living had cognitive problems, even full-blown dementia, Alzheimer's. Assisted living operators are faced with a big issue here. What are they going to do? Some have tried to integrate people with cognitive problems into the general population. But what generally has happened is that a new kind of facility called a memory care facility has developed. And these are often separate units, a separate set of rooms. They're often locked. But this in the 90s, 1990s and beyond, with assisted living especially, this is the origin of memory care as best I can figure it out. There's very little data on memory care except in the last 10 years. What I found is that in 2015, around 250,000 beds were dedicated to memory care, primarily in assisted living facilities and nursing homes. There are some freestanding assisted living facilities. As of last year, the 250 is now 270,000 dedicated beds. And lastly, in my history here, we've got continuing care retirement communities, CCRCs. These are facilities that provide a continuum of care to residents, from independent living to assisted living to memory care to acute nursing care, all on one campus, sometimes all in one building. Jessica, could you play that brief video about a CCRC that's just outside New York City? Thanks.
Broadview is going to be a retirement community that's unlike any other, really in the tri-state area right now. We are what you call a university-based retirement community, and you may have already read about us because we've been featured in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and on NPR. There's been a lot of press about us, and why is that? It'll be a very diverse group of people that call Broadview home. But there will be a commonality that each of them are interested in this opportunity for lifetime learning, because it truly is the marriage or the synergy between a thriving university and a retirement community. We like to say knowledge comes from learning what we hope we're doing today, and wisdom comes from living what we think will happen on the campus of Broadview.
Thanks, Jessica. Thank you. Well, it's actually surprising. It would surprise me when I looked into the history of CCRCs. I would have thought they were just, very contemporary kinds of organizations, but they actually date back to the 19th century when religious organizations wanted to provide some kind of facility to care for their aging ministers and other members of their congregations. And so they offered residential housing and tried to provide a care component as well, living and care. The care might have been on site or sometimes nearby. So CCRCs go way, way back. In 1900, there were 7 of them. Now, they didn't have there weren't probably just a matter of hundreds of beds. I don't know. Couldn't find data. CCRCs really take off in the much more contemporary period, but there's growth in the 60s and 70s, and then in the 1980s, as assisted living really expands rapidly. CCRCs also expand rapidly. In 2005, there were around 1,300 CCRCs with around 175,000 beds. In 2015, 1,500 CCRCs with 210,000 beds. And as of last year, over 2,000 CCRCs with over 250,000 beds. This is also somewhat surprising, and I'm not entirely confident of this estimate, but the best estimate I came across was that 80% of CCRCs are nonprofits. I'm not exactly sure why, but I do know that there are for-profits in the CCRC area, and that private operators are definitely interested in this area. The fact is, though, CCRCs are very expensive, especially near New York, in and near New York City. You have to pay a large upfront entrance fee, which is not true for most other living and care arrangements. An entrance fee that can range from, depending on geography, where they are, let's say $200,000 to $1 million. And depending on the type of contract you have with one of these facilities, and I refer you back to my 2024 tables for all of that information, depending on a contract A, B, C, or D, you may be able to pass some of that entrance fee on to your heirs, or you may not. And contrary to what that Broadview in Purchase, New York video showed, most CCRCs are largely white and upper middle class. More power to them at Broadview if they can make a more diverse community. More power to them. So to summarize this brief history, we've gone from poor houses to nursing homes, to assisted living, memory care, and continuing care retirement communities. Except for CCRCs, most of these facilities are dominated by the private sector. Jessica, can you put up table 1 just to highlight this, because I think it's important? There it is, by facility type. For-profit, not-for-profit, over time. So you go, independent living goes from 75% for-profit to 80% for-profit. Assisted living from 81% to 82%. Memory care from 80% to 83%. Nursing care, 66 to 79%. The not-for-profits, the percentages go down, but that doesn't mean that the number of beds that are operated are necessarily going down. But I don't want to get into all that, the weeds of data. That's not my purpose today, particularly. Thanks, Jessica. You can take that down. But I do want to emphasize that the history of living and care arrangements continues to unfold to this day. Assisted living was originally seen as a reform. Now some people are dissatisfied with assisted living. And so we have people arguing for alternatives to assisted living. I just mentioned briefly some of what those alternatives involve, or name some of them. You can try to decouple, separate living and care arrangements and try to keep people largely in their homes, and let them call in care when they need it and have an organization that's there to do that. You can have staff if you have a living and care arrangement, and instead of having staff in the traditional hierarchy, you can have staff that are organized horizontally in teams that care for residents, or even care for people who are out on their own, but these teams are sent out. You can have so-called naturally occurring retirement communities where there's a great concentration of seniors, and there are also a lot of in this area, often in a city, but some could be in a small city where there's also a large concentration of services, good social services and medical services, and support services, and people living in this kind of an area of a city, in a neighborhood, can draw on those services, and that's called a naturally occurring retirement community. Again, I talk about those back in 2024. You can go back and see more about that. CCRCs, which are mainly, as I say, very expensive with high entrance fees. I have seen references to CCRCs with leases and no entry fee. Also, I have seen references to CCRCs where you can sign up to be in this CCRC at some point in the future, but meanwhile, you stay in your home and the CCRC will provide you with services in your home, and/or you can go to the CCRC if you're close to it for both services and amenities, maybe. I think there's very little of this. I'd like it. Sounds good to me, but it is an alternative arrangement that's maybe on the horizon. So history continues to unfold in the whole long-term care sector. But really what I want to dig into now is, what do we do now? What do we do? Here we're faced with this situation. Here's this history. Here are all these facilities, living and care arrangements that we have. How do we make choices? How do we make decisions? What do we hang our hats on? What are some handles we have? Jessica, could page 4 of the outline? So I'm going to highlight a bunch of factors: location, cost, affordability, type of ownership, all those ones you see on the screen there. That's what I'm going to get into now. Okay, Jessica, thanks. And another way to phrase it is, what makes one living and care arrangement better than others? Or Another way, what determines whether you're going to get good quality care in one place versus another? So let's start with location. And I'm not going to give you all of this material. I've got 1, 2, 3. I got 5 or 6 pages, 10 to 16. I've got 6 pages of, or 5 pages of factors to consider. I'm not going to go through all those, but I'm going to try to figure out with Jessica and Diane and Bonnie and the executive committee how we take this part of the presentation and make it into a document that you can have for yourselves. So don't get upset if I go through these and don't mention all the things and just say to you, there's a lot more here. I'm pretty sure we're going to get it for you so that you can have it as a sort of checklist in a way, if you want it. And I'll also say that there's a lot of these out there. I pulled from my own experience visiting facilities, and I also pulled from a lot of what some good organizations have put up on the web for people to look at about who are trying to make decisions. Okay. Location. Are you willing to move to another state, city, or county in order to live in the kind of facility that you want to live in, or the kind of living and care arrangement you want? If you're not willing to move, what's available close to where you are now? And other location factors involved here are, is it close enough for family and friends to visit? Can you get out and about to the things that you want to get out to, shopping, museums, other places you want to have access to in your life? Does the facility provide transport for this? That kind of thing. Location factors. Cost and affordability. As I say, go back to my 2024 tables about cost. And also about resources that you can bring to bear to afford these kinds of places, these various places. The factors that affect cost are certainly the type of facility with, like CCRCs being very expensive, but assisted living can be very expensive, especially in New York, very expensive. 10, 15,000 a month, more than that. Ugh, amazing. The length of stay, the size of the living unit, the level of care you need. These are all going to affect cost. Make sure you look at the lease or the contract if you're going into one of these places. Get somebody to go over it with you. That's all on the cost side. Can you afford it? Do you have sufficient income? What if the fees go up, as they do in for-profit facilities? They go up every year. In not-for-profits, they often go up. They've got to cover expenses. Whether you're for-profit or not-for-profit, you got to cover expenses. Not-for-profits, I just got an email from one saying we're holding down our increase to 5%. That's still up. Is Medicaid accepted? Is long-term care insurance accepted? And regarding long-term care insurance, I have a very important resource to share with you in the Q&A. So if anyone wants to bring that up and remind me, please do. If you're self-pay in a facility, and as I've said in the history, a lot of facilities rely on, people with means, with resources to that's what keeps them going, keeps them in the black. What happens if you live a whole lot longer than, you expect to live maybe, and and your money runs out? Will the facility Or will will you be able to go on in your living and care arrangement? CCRCs have policies about this in their contracts, in the contract A, B, C, and D. You certainly want to know about that if you're considering one of those. Will a facility let you go on to Medicaid? If you go on to Medicaid, will they let you stay in the same unit the same space that you're in? Will they put you into a different space? Those kinds of considerations. Next really big factor, of course, is the type of ownership, for-profit or not-for-profit. And then along with that, secular or non-secular and religious. My concerns about for-profit ownership and management of long-term care facilities is that their goal is to make money for the owners and shareholders. Whereas the goal of not-for-profits is to fulfill their philanthropic, charitable, or religious mission. If you're a for-profit, you're in a for-profit place, you got to be careful of emphasis on cost cutting, overspending on improvements, over efficiency, over effectiveness, of efficiency and cost cutting over quality of care. Some of these for-profits own many, many, many facilities across the country even. They're chains. They want to be efficient. I'm all for efficiency, but not at the cost of good care. Care can get commodified in capitalism in a country like the US, meaning that your living and care arrangement becomes a standardized product as opposed to care, something that requires dedicated attention to individual needs, as opposed to treating residents in standardized ways. My sense is that not-for-profits are better in this regard. They're more caring about their residents. They have a mission. They're trying to fulfill that mission. They have humane values, Presbyterian homes, the other religious organizations, or secular organizations like the New York Foundation for Senior Citizens, which owns and operates long-term care facilities in New York. They have a charitable philanthropic mission. Another aspect of this is that owners can be separate from managers. The owner, the company that owns a facility or a chain of facilities can have a management company that manages these facilities on site. They have a big chain. They can have multiple management companies managing groups of facilities. That can cause some concerns. What's the relationship between ownership and management? Does management on site have flexibility, local flexibility, or, as you know that phrase, do they have to answer to corporate in ways that is rigid or ways that are rigid? Another really big factor, staffing. Let me read you a quote from an article. At its core, the quality of all living and care arrangements is driven by the workforce. Yet, the long-term care sector is seriously challenged by workforce issues that have been exacerbated by the COVID pandemic. These issues include staffing shortages, low wages, insufficient benefits, poor supervision, strenuous workloads, and limited career advancement opportunities. Unquote. A recent survey found almost 60% of assisted living communities reporting that their workforce situation is worse now than it was in 2020. Over 80% reported staffing shortages that they're unable to fill. And this situation has been exacerbated by, guess who? Our president and his administration. Biden administration passed a rule to increase staffing levels in nursing homes. Trump is in the process of very close to repealing the rule. Trump and his immigration policies, a significant percentage of staff in the long-term care sector are immigrants. I don't have to say any more about Trump's anti-immigration policies exacerbating staffing shortages. So if you're considering a living and care arrangement other than staying at home, you're going to want to look at the number and kinds of staff that work in the facility. You want the number of personal care aides, the support staff, the nursing staff, the supervisory and management staff. How many full-time, how many part-time, how many on-site, how many off-site? Well-paid, are they well-paid, well-trained, unionized? What kind of training do they get? What kind of turnover is there? Turnover being a good indication of satisfaction with their job or in dissatisfaction. Staffing's really important. Onward and upward. The age and status of the residents of facilities. In assisted living, over half of residents are 85 or older. Of the remaining half, a significant proportion are 75 to 84. Only a small percentage are under 75. That distribution skews older, even older in nursing homes. In CCRCs and independent living, it skews somewhat younger, but not significantly, I'm afraid to say. Sorry to say. 40% of CCRC residents are over 85. I don't know what's happening on my screen's going a little funny, but okay, I'm still okay to keep talking. Gender. Women far outnumber men in all facilities. In assisted living, 60% female, 33% male. Even more skewed towards women in nursing homes. I don't have data, but I doubt it's much different in CCRCs and independent living facilities. Health status. 50% of residents in assisted living, high blood pressure. 40%, some form of dementia. 23% heart disease. 25% depression. These percentages are more extreme in nursing homes. CCRCs and independent living, lower rates of physical and cognitive impairment. Median length of stay, around 22 months in an assisted living facility. After 22 months, 60% of residents move out of assisted living and transition to a skilled nursing unit or a different facility. Other factors you may want to pay attention to, the number of residents. Are they single or in couples? Are they gay or straight? Race and ethnicity, social class. What about people's backgrounds in academia, the arts, professions, other fields? You can find these things out. Almost next to last factor that'll help you hopefully help you make decisions about whether you're going to go somewhere other than staying at home. Um, the approach, the facility's approach to living and care, the facility's policies. How much autonomy do residents have? Can residents come and go as they please? How is autonomy and independence balanced with safety and security? Do residents have a say in what happens with the use of public space? Do residents have a say about the kinds of cultural activities, the choice of films, other communal matters? Do resident committees exist? What's the general atmosphere of the place? Do you like it? Is it home-like? Is it more institutional? Do you like the decor? Are TVs playing? Mary and I went to a place and TVs were playing everywhere in the public spaces. There was background music everywhere. Is there a pleasing outdoor space? What about the size of the unit? Does it have a kitchenette? I've seen some pretty tiny spaces in some very good facilities, but the space was tiny. Can you bring in your own furniture? What about pets? What about overnight guests? What about amenities? Meals? What are they like? Even really important, are staff services provided on demand when you need and want them, or on a schedule set by management? Cross-reference profit-making facilities and efficiency. Let's do everything on a prearranged schedule. It's much more efficient, et cetera, et cetera. Medical care, is it provided on-site or off-site? On prearranged days or when you need it, demand it, ask for it. Those are some factors there in that category of facility policies and so forth. Okay, I'm getting tired. Social organization and the culture of the facility. Will this be a place where you're likely to find a strong sense of community? I've talked to people, friends, relatives, people at facilities. People are thinking about going into facilities. They're feeling homebound or more homebound than they used to be. They're losing friends, they're losing relatives. People aren't coming over to visit as much. They can't get out as much. They think that they might find friends and a sense of community in a new living and care arrangement. That's an important consideration. Will it improve your social life? Will you be able to make friends? What if you don't? What if you want to go into one of these places and keep to yourself? Will you be ostracized for that? What if you go to a place, how will you be introduced? Do you like the way the policy of the facility for introducing you to the community? Do some of these communities have cliques? They have hierarchies. They're social organizations, folks. And they can be in groups and there can be out groups. But there are others that I've heard people report, no, that's not a problem at all. But it's something to possibly pay attention to. And then, sorry to say, we're old. We're going to die. We may die in one of these places. Are you going to feel comfortable dying in one of these places? Or can you be in one of these places but make an arrangement for dying somewhere else? Sorry to say it, but I think it's important to think about these things. Okay. I won't review that section there. As I say, we're going to make that available and you'll have it as a checklist, as you'll have it. I hope it's I hope it's helpful. Some concluding remarks. Long-term care is a big growth sector in the U.S. economy. It's a significant market for corporations. Private equity firms, real estate investment trusts, hedge funds, they're going into this area big time. There's a huge increase in the baby boomer generation. The baby boomer generation started being born in 45. They're 80 now. That's the market for these facilities. Nonprofits are also trying to serve elderly people, and there are plenty of nonprofits trying to make opportunities available for people. In New York City, the Hebrew Home for the Aged, now rebranded as River Spring Living, because they can't make it go with just the Jewish population. They're developing River's Edge as part of a new CCRC. It's going to be a big, expensive, luxury, I don't know what it is, 21-story building overlooking the Hudson. But the nonprofits are in this, and there are also some very good philanthropic and charitable organizations involved. I raised my concerns about for-profit versus nonprofit already, and I just want to re-emphasize that this is the United States, and this is how American capitalism generally functions. We leave sectors like long-term care to the private sector, largely. It's different in some social welfare capitalist democracies like Germany, but that's not where we live. And that's what we're faced with, and we've got to make choices. And I tried to highlight some of the choices that we have, both in terms of the kinds of facilities and the factors within those, about those facilities, whether they're profit or not profit, where they're located, what their staffing is like, how much autonomy you have, what the internal social organization and culture is, among others. I leave you with what I call the elephant in the room. This is a composite portrait, but it's based on real people. David is a retired social worker. He lives with his wife in Brooklyn. He was recently diagnosed with Alzheimer's. His wife has her own health problems. David doesn't want his wife to try to take care of him at home as his cognition and physical situation deteriorates. She suggests they move into an assisted living facility that also has a memory care unit, which they can afford, even though it costs over $10,000 a month in New York City. But David told me he doesn't intend to let Alzheimer's turn him into a shell of his former self, where you know about Alzheimer's, I don't need to tell you. And he doesn't want to go into a locked memory care unit, even if his wife is in the same building. That's the elephant in the room. In the US, we don't have the legal right to choose when and how we will end our lives. We have some good news. We have various options for living in care arrangements that I've told you about. That's where we are. And I thank you very much for the opportunity to do all this research and to talk to you about it. L'chaim.
Thank you very much, Jim, for all that time and effort and emotion that you have brought to this topic that we all have either faced or need to face very shortly. We all have dealt with this either, if not for ourselves, then family members and friends. So I think we've all learned a lot from this. We do have time for, I don't see Mike Foley yet, but I think we have some time for some questions and answers. And we do already have Marcia's hand up. Marcia, would you like to unmute and ask Jim a question?
Yes, thank you very much. I thought that, well, a couple of things. I thought that we do have the compassionate care in 9 or 10 states where people can choose for assisted termination of life. It's going through the New York system. It's not passed here yet, but there are 9 states where it has passed. Florence, you're saying no? I know that it has passed in several states. That's number one. Number two, I just a review in a larger sense of what other countries do when you say that the investment here is low from the government. I'd love to know at some point what the ideal situation is, or what countries have a more, whatever, more generous mode. And also, I think that you should publish this, all your research, what you've done. I think it would be good if PSC put it into a little, well, maybe it's there, we could print it out, because it's something to reference. The last point I make is that there's places like the Anthroposophic Society that has a place upstate somewhere, and that's seemingly more more generous, more education, more ecological, more everything. I just wondered if you had checked out any of those kinds of places. Thank you.
Thanks, Marcia. Maybe we'll take one or two questions and then let Jim respond. John Hyland?
Yeah. Thank you, Jim. It was extraordinary and so well done and helpful. One of the thoughts I had was very much, it was the same as Marsh's. I'm very curious about what they do in France and Germany and the Scandinavian countries. What can we learn from them and so forth. Secondly, it strikes me that this is an area where co-ops might be useful, might be a form. I've been thinking, in the midst of the Trump madness of shutting so many things down, as bad as that is, does that create an opportunity for us to do more things ourselves? Can we form communities, maybe small communities, who address this issue of how we're going to live out our days? So those were two thoughts that I had. Thank you.
So before we go to Nancy and Erwin, Jim, you want to address one or two or three of those possible questions?
Okay. In terms of compassionate care, medical aid in dying, Marcia's right. There are a bunch of states that have that, but it's very restrictive. You have to be within 6 months you have to have two doctors, generally two doctors certify that you're within 6 months of death. I support I think medical aid in dying is good, but it's not, does not really give you what I consider the right to die at other moments in your life when you may, in your old age, when you may want that. And then both Marcia and John, other countries, yep. I can cite an article that's not written. It's a report. It's not too long, and it has a chapter on other countries. It's a good place to start. George Mackenzie, Mackenzie, George Mackenzie, long-term care in the United States, history, financing, and directions for reform. Long-term care in the U.S., history, financing, and directions for reform, put out by the Upjohn Institute. It's very, what's that word? Puts everything together very concisely. It's only like 125 pages or something like that. Mentions other countries. Co-ops, John. Yeah. I've seen reference to that. I've trying to do things cooperatively. I think it's a great idea. And co-housing. I know people have tried to use co-housing. I think if that's what you're thinking of as well, as a way into this, but it's not easy. You're talking about living and care arrangements, and these early reformers who developed assisted living confronted just these kinds of issues, and it's a tough nut to crack. It's a tough nut to crack. And in New York City, it's one hell of a tough nut because of the price of real estate. I don't know the anthroposic, so I'd like, Marcia, if you could send me an email and tell me the name of it, I'd like to hear about that.
Okay, let's take two more questions. We're up to Nancy Roma, and then we'll do Erwin.
Hi, great presentation and so useful. A little depressing, but we're here. A couple of things. One is Switzerland has a number of organizations that you have to apply for. One of them is named Pegasus, but you have to apply. I think it's not cheap, but I don't know if it's $10,000 or $15,000 that you have to put in as a kind of a down payment, and you go there with loved ones or on your own or whoever you want to go with, and it's supposedly a dignified dying. One of the problems with all of the new laws that have come out is that they don't address dementia. Because with dementia, there isn't no one can say, well, in 6 months you're going to die, or in 1 year you're going to die. So that's, a problem that many people will have, not wanting to lose all facility. Another thing is a question about, I love John's idea of co-ops, but I'm wondering also if there's been any discussion of CUNY sponsoring some kind of facility, because I know that many universities are attaching assisted living or various kinds of senior housing to their campuses, and then they afford the residents all sorts of interesting educational opportunities. I don't know if that's been discussed at all on any campus in New York City for the real estate issues that Jim raised. And again, thank you.
Okay, Erwin, we'll take your questions and then we'll go back to Jim.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim, for that wonderful and very useful presentation. You gave us a lot of material to ask about, and I would like to add one more from the experience of a family member. And this has to do with the continuous care communities, because the assumption is that when you need to move from one level of care to another, there will actually be an open bed for you in the unit that you have to go to. So if you're going from assisted living to memory care, that there will actually be a bed. And my relative was in that situation. He's in a continuous care community. And when his wife developed dementia, it turned out there was no bed in the memory care unit. And he had to have his wife taken to a separate private facility, and he remained in the continuous care community. She eventually died, and he's still in that community. But that was a very unfortunate situation. So I think one of the questions you should ask is, can the continuous care community guarantee that when you have to move from one level to another, that they will actually provide a facility?
Okay.
Thanks, Jim.
That's a good idea. Jim, you want to respond to Erwin and Nancy?
Right. Nancy's absolutely right about Switzerland. It is a way that you can choose when and how to die, and you can do it. Switzerland seems to be the go-to place. Uh, and when I looked at it a few days ago, it was $20,000. It's gone up in cost significantly, but that's what it is. And if you go through a rigorous vetting process, you're interviewed, you have to prove that you're of sound mind and body. If you're in early stage of Alzheimer's, you can still possibly prove that, as some people have. There's plenty of stuff out on the web, stories of people who've done the Swiss option, even at an early stage of dementia. So just that. And I think there are other countries where this option may exist, but I haven't found that. I haven't looked into it. CUNY as a sponsor of a facility, or universities as sponsors. Yeah, that Broadview, that quick video, that SUNY purchase, the president was a forward-thinking person, I guess, forward-thinking. He was behind that Broadview and got legislation that helped it go through. I didn't know that a lot of universities are attaching facilities. I wish CUNY could do it. That would be great. And Erwin, that's of course a really good point. I'm sorry to hear that story, but it's a very good point. And also, just to get into a facility in the first place, there are waiting lists. Woodland Pond in New Paltz, it's a nonprofit, has a waiting list to get in, a CCRC with a somewhat lower entrance fee. And there are some of our colleagues are up there at Woodland Pond, and they like it a lot, but there's a waiting list. That's the bad news. The good news is, I'm sorry to say, those waiting lists do clear out and have openings on them. I don't have to explain to you why.
Bonnie, you want to ask a question, and then Elizabeth?
Sure. I have both a question and a comment. First, I was wondering if Jim could speak more about what Medicaid will pay for. My understanding was Medicaid would not pay for assisted living because Medicaid only pays for medical expenses, and assisted living is considered to be, general living expenses. But this may vary from state to state. I don't know. In New York, I think they don't, but maybe in some cases they do. The other comment is you didn't speak too much about this because you were talking about living facilities, but a lot of people I know are managing to stay in their own homes because they only need a little bit of help. And if you've been in your own home in New York and you're our age, very often you're in a rent stabilized apartment, or you own your own house or co-op. And so your living costs are relatively low. So it may be cheaper to pay for aides to come in as much as you want, and have you, help you when you're home. And that might be a more cost-effective way to do that. And in New York State, Medicaid will pay for aides to come in and help you if you eventually run through all your assets. If aides are medically necessary, it's called care in the community, as opposed to care in a facility. So I wonder if you could talk about that.
Okay, let me just take Elizabeth, and then we'll go back to Jim. Let me see. I can ask you to unmute, and then you can unmute. There you
All
go.
right, sorry. Yes, I want to thank you for this topic. It's one that I think about a lot. And I want to just hook on to what Bonnie was saying about using aides from the community or people that are more available if you live at home. Because number one, we're in the face of the immigrant push out, and that has become a real issue. Certainly, I live in an area where a lot of people use aides from the community, but nevertheless, the aides are very much more threatened and much more concerned. So I'm not sure at the very moment, obviously as a long-term solution, perhaps this will get back into balance. But I want to bring up something that somebody mentioned in the chat, which is the issue of concierge care. And it seems to me that concierge care is a diminishment of Medicare and, of course, Medicaid. And that we as a union have to pay attention to the fact that if a doctor is going to be charging money in a larger way than would have gotten money, that we have to say, no, this diminishes our social services and that we cannot accept it. And of course, that's going to present a lot of challenges to people. I think we really have to pay attention to this issue of concierge, where the doctor is charging $2,500 and will give you appointments at any time when I can't get an appointment for a doctor for the next 4 months. So those things are still in this parameter of, oh, I'm old and I need attention. Thank you so much.
Okay, Jim, we'll go back.
Well, Bonnie's question about what Medicaid will pay for it, it's really important. You may know more than me, Bonnie, because of all the work you've done in this area. I know from visiting facilities and from reading whatever of the literature I've been reading that there's some wiggle room. And firstly, states can get waivers. Secondly, facilities have found ways to cover services that are medical type services, and use Medicaid for that in facilities. Assisted living is no longer, New York State has very strict regulations of what it means when it licenses a bed as an assisted living bed, and New York State licenses beds, not facilities as a whole. And just what I said, that some facilities have found ways to try to get Medicaid to pay for some services that you might think would not be covered. And staying at home with help and getting Medicaid to pay for that, to me, it seems like that the focus of public policy in many states and at the federal level is to try to have long-term care for the elderly at home as much as possible. It's less expensive. And there are lots of programs and depending on, some of them are means tested and some not. And but it is I think a positive and progressive kind of policy. Whether you can find that for where you live is another matter. But I certainly encourage people to look for, if they think they're going to be on Medicaid or qualify for Medicaid, there are many programs out there. Look for the ways that you might be able to use it, as Bonnie suggests, if you want to stay at home, age in place at home and get help when you need it. As for the concierge item, I understand what you're saying, Elizabeth. I did read an article by a gerontologist who is not in New York City. I think she may have been near Boston. I'm not sure. I think near Boston. I'm not sure. She bemoaned the fact that as a gerontologist, she would see clients who would, patients, and then they'd have some kind of an acute episode. They'd be admitted to a facility and maybe a nursing home, and she had no tie to them at that point. And there was no continuity of care. They then were cared for by the facility's medical staff. She developed a model whereby gerontologists would get concierge, have some kind of a concierge program that would allow them to go into homes, literally go into people's homes and cut off the admission, the acute episode, meaning an admission to a nursing home. So I just want to say maybe it's not supporting the concierge model, but there is this a big issue that of continuity of care, and that we can end up having a doctor, maybe a gerontologist, who's trying to take care of us and keep us out of hospitals and keep us out of, you know, these facilities, these acute care facilities, hospitals, and so forth. And they have a hard time doing it just because of the way the American medical system works.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to ask the next three people, Francine, Jack, and Dan, if they would put their questions in the chat because we only have 20 minutes left and we have Mike Foley who will actually talk about what you say, asking in the chat about long-term, about catastrophic health insurance. So let's ask the remaining of the people to go into the chat, and Jim can either go there, or you can send it to us at our email, and Jim, we can forward them to Jim.
Yeah,
So,
please do. Yeah, forward them to me, please.
and Mike, where are you?
I'm right here, Diane. How are you?
Great, Mike. We've been getting a lot of questions in the chat about the catastrophic, which you actually wrote a little bit about. So take it away.
Good, good. Yeah, so hopefully everyone read my story in the most recent retiree benefit newsletter. And, you know, it really makes me happy when I talk to a retiree that purchased either the catastrophic major medical policy and the long-term care policy, one or the other, or ideally both. And this would have been way back in the day. So we haven't, here at the fund, we've been unable to offer these policies for over 12 years now because we can't find an insurance company to underwrite them at an affordable premium. But if you did buy those policies and you're unsure of whether or not they're still active, you can always reach out to me and we can determine that. It takes a little bit of, takes a little detective work. But what is a very common situation is that you would have set up automatic deduction from your payroll when you were an active employee at CUNY, and then hopefully transferred it to automatic deduction from your pension once you retired. And if that is the case, it's sort of an out of sight, out of mind situation where you've maybe just didn't remember that you had these policies. So what I would like everyone to do is see if you've got a pension deduction that looks odd to you. It would be a relatively small amount of money. And if you show that deduction coming out of either your TRS pension or your TIAA pension, that's a very strong clue that you have this policy. I don't have access to a direct database that will show you if you have a policy, but I can help you determine that by calling the company that manages either the long-term care policy or the catastrophic policy. So fingers crossed that you have it. It's an active policy. The premiums have been paid. And if you do, a lot of the concerns that I've heard being raised today can be alleviated through the use of a long-term care policy and a catastrophic policy. Long-term care is exactly what it describes. It's for use for an assisted living facility, things like that. It's not going to pay for everything, but it's going to pay for some. A catastrophic policy is really good for in-home care. Not going to pay for everything, but it's going to pay for a good amount. So you can sort of augment any coverage you may get from Medicare or Medicaid with these policies. Now, that being said, if you don't have a catastrophic major medical policy or a long-term care policy, it's going to be a challenge. These policies are extremely expensive now, and it's hard to find them. So, for instance, your best bet to purchase a long-term care policy is through New York State United Teachers, NYSUT.org. All of you, as members of the retiree chapter, are NYSUT members. You can go over to the NYSUT website, nysut.org, and under their member benefits and the insurance, you can submit your information and get a rough estimate of what your premium would be for a long-term care policy. It's probably not going to be on the low side. It's probably going to be on the high side, but it's going to be much better than you would do on the open market. So if you are able to work that into your budget somehow, and you feel that you need to protect yourself against some extremely high costs related to long-term care in the future, then I would urge you to at least go and explore if it's suitable for you. A catastrophic plan, NICET does offer them, but it's on occasion. Now, I just did have a conversation with one of my colleagues, one of my friends over at NICET. She did imply very strongly that they would be offering a catastrophic plan at some point in 2026. They're a little cagey about how they do it. They only offer it for like a period of about 1 month. And we try and publicize it as soon as we learn about it. We try and publicize it as best we can. And again, it's not going to be what you or I would consider to be affordable, but it's going to be the best deal you can get outside of the open market. So stay tuned to see if NICET offers a catastrophic policy. And I don't want to sound like I'm being a salesman here with NICET. NICET's a great organization, and there are other ways to get a catastrophic policy or a long-term care policy on the open market. I would urge you to go through a reputable organization like an AARP, though. But in my experience, NICET is going to offer you the best deal that you can get on the open market. So again, it warms my heart when I talk to a retiree that has both of these policies. They've had them for decades, and I would urge everyone, especially with the catastrophic policy, is start putting them to use. Catastrophic is not simply a catastrophic situation. It's for almost everyday use. Any out-of-pocket medical costs that you incur, you more than likely can submit a claim form and get reimbursed for those costs. So if we take away nothing from this conversation today, just look in your paperwork, see if you can determine any kind of deduction coming out of your paycheck, coming out of your pension, or from your bank account. If you have any concerns or you need to learn definitively, give me a call and I'm happy to walk you through the process of how to determine if you have the policy or not. So that's kind of how those two policies work. And Jim, please.
Something I wanted to mention is in talking to the people at Hebrew Home for the Aged, now River Spring Living, the woman who's the sales manager there has 30 years of experience in long-term care in both the private and a not-for-profit sector, mostly not-for-profit. And she is willing to do a workshop for our members on long-term care insurance policies that you hold. She says that they vary from company to company, maybe even individual to individual. I'm not sure about that. And they have to be examined very closely. And she's willing to sit with a group of up to 12 people and do that. And so if the executive committee wants to know more about that, and she says it's not a quid pro quo for us to try to sell you on our new CCRC. I asked her very specifically, can I tell people about this? Is it a quid pro quo? No, she's willing to do it pro bono. And she sounds like she really knows this stuff. So Mike,
that's good information. I would say this: if you do have the catastrophic policy or the long-term care policy, either through us or from NICET, let's say, it would come through two companies. Catastrophic would be through a company called AMBA, AMBA. They used to be called Mercer, same company, changed their name to AMBA. The long-term care policy would have come through the Hancock Insurance Company. So, what that person was discussing, Jim, it's certainly valid information. I'm just wondering how many of the retiree chapter members would have a policy sort of that would have been purchased on the private private market, so to speak, through another company than those two. But hard to say. But yeah, I mean, it's certainly the more information, the better. But just guard yourself against paying an excessive amount of money before you look into what your options are through NICET.
Okay, we have Michael Engberg.
Michael,
Let's unmute. You need to unmute. Try it again. I'm sorry. Try it again.
there we go.
Okay, I lost my picture, but if you hear me, then that's
I can hear you and see you, Michael.
okay. Well, okay. I have really two questions. It seems to me that the last time you joined us, you said that you would be mailing out a summary statement about the various benefits through the welfare fund. I never received any such mailing. Was it only on the website that that information was going to be made available?
All of our information is always available on the website. If you need something specific mailed to you, such as the catastrophic policy, for instance, I'm happy to mail it out to you. But pulling what's called an explanation of benefits or an SPD summary plan of the entire website, it would have to be delivered via a very large box.
Yes, no, I'm familiar with that.
Yeah.
Let me ask you then my other question. I have the AMBA plan with my
Good.
wife.
Excellent.
I've had it for many, many years and haven't received
Great.
a nickel from it.
Yep.
When you spoke about it last time and again this time, you seemed to suggest that we could accumulate
Mm-hmm.
a $10,000 deductible.
Yes.
We could accumulate that $10,000 on expenses that we've paid out of hand and expenses that have been covered by Medicare and
That's right. So
but it's been my impression
Yep.
that you can satisfy the deductible only by expenses associated with a single illness, rather than, well, I saw this doctor for my ankle, and I saw that doctor for my elbow, and I saw that doctor for my URI. Those all seem to be
No, Michael, it's my understanding that the $10,000 deductible can be met through any charged medical cost to you.
and not a single illness.
Not a single illness, not a single incident or illness. So,
Okay, well, that's very reassuring.
in other words, when the very first thing that at the top of the policy it says $10,000 deductible, that frightens a lot of people, and rightfully so. But that $10,000 deductible is relatively easy to meet. So,
Oh, sure. If I look at everything that I've spent for both
yes,
me and my wife,
absolutely.
each of us.
The challenge, Michael, is to get documentation of those costs. So either go back to your doctor, go back to the hospital, see what bills you have still lying around the house, gather them all up and submit them and see how close you get to that deductible.
How do I get the claim form?
You call AMBA.
Okay, got
Yep.
it. Thank you, Mike.
And use it and seriously, Michael, I really like to call this an everyday policy. Any out-of-pocket cost, even including some like dental costs and stuff like that. For not super expensive dentist stuff, but you'd be surprised. So go look at the policy. It's on our website. You'll get a good sense of what can be covered, and it's not simply just for catastrophes. So,
Okay, Bruce Brink.
Thank you.
Bruce.
Yeah, okay, good. Thanks. I wanted to add to what Mike was saying about the catastrophic policy. The $10,000 is a lot of money, but I unfortunately have had an opportunity to use this policy, and I must say it's really quite amazing. I was surprised to find out how good it is. I just want to emphasize that in regard to Michael's questions and Mike's answer, it's true, you don't have to have one issue that can be used to satisfy the deductible, but more important, it's not what you pay, but it's what you've been charged in my
Exactly.
opinion, and that's very important. So my use of this policy was based on the fact that I needed an operation a few years ago. I paid $300 out of pocket for that operation, nowhere near the $10,000 you need. But the hospital expenses exceeded $10,000. And because I was charged $10,000, that covered the deductible. So it's really important for everyone to understand that it's not what you're paying only, but it's what you're charged. And then once you meet that deductible, you can use the insurance policy to cover all medical expenses that aren't covered by your insurance.
Mhm.
Co-pays, medication is covered as well. So it's really something that people should take advantage of. And as Mike was indicating, it may be possible, even if you don't suffer a major catastrophe like an operation, that over the period of a look back of 3 years, which is what you can do to
Mhm.
satisfy this deductible, you may make it.
Bruce, you just said it far better than I could.
Thanks.
Diane, you don't need it. You don't need me anymore. Just have Bruce show up.
No, well, I wanted you to verify this. I mean, this is my experience, but
Excellent. No, there's nothing better than a good testimonial. Thank you, Bruce.
Okay,
great.
Erwin.
Yes, on the long-term care,
Yeah,
I've had the policy since it started
excellent.
way back in 1990,
Yep.
90, somewhere around there. And there is a provision in this policy that you have to meet, or you can't meet certain activities of daily living.
That's right.
3 out of 6, I think it is.
Yeah.
So it's not a policy that's designed for what Jim was talking about, assisted living facilities, where you're going into a residential situation and you're getting very limited help with medication and so on. That wouldn't fall under the John Hancock long-term care. You have to not be able to do 3 of the assisted living, the daily living activities, things such as getting out of bed, feeding yourself, toileting. I forget what the others, but they're basic things like that. If you can't do 3 of those, you're not likely to be in an assisted living situation. You're more likely to be in either a memory care or a nursing home situation. So I would say, even though I've had the policy, I don't look forward to ever using it.
But you'll be glad though to know it's there. It's peace of mind.
Yes,
It
if
really
I
is.
had to use it, I'd be
It's-
very glad, because it does
Yep.
pay a significant portion
Yep.
of your costs for a period of time. There's a total amount that it pays, which if you haven't taken the increases that they offer, is
Yep.
probably somewhere around $150,000, $175,000.
Yeah.
Well, that's a lot of money that you can use for long-term care, but
Yep.
you have to be in that toward that nursing home side of things.
Yeah.
I would think, although maybe Jim would correct me on that,
Yeah.
that would not be an assisted living situation.
Yeah, I think it depends on your own individual situation, essentially. I would evaluate where you are or what you need, what's available to you, and then compare it to what's available through the policy would be the best bet. And frankly, the collective wisdom of the people on this call is immense. So please tell your children, your grandkids, tell them about long-term care policies, tell them about catastrophic policies. And obviously, when you're younger, these policies are much more affordable, and their later self will thank them. So whenever I talk to new employees at CUNY, their eyes glaze over a little bit, but I tell them, listen, look into some of the benefits you have through NYSET and through and whatnot, some of these long-term insurance policies, because these costs are only going to go up and up and up. And, so many of you were wise to do what you did all those decades ago and get these policies. I hope the message is getting across to some younger folks. So if you have someone in your family, and just tell them, look into this, because, it's something worth considering.
Okay, we have time for one more question, and that's Francis.
Hi there. I have
Hi,
a
Francis.
silly question.
No silly questions.
If you go into an assisted living facility and say it's $12,000 a month for your care, for your medications, for them to give you medications and all that stuff, would the welfare fund that we have supply the medications as they're supplying the medications when you're at home?
Well, yes, you would use your CVS SilverScript card to, to supply you with medications. I would be suspicious of an assisted living facility that says we're going to provide you drugs. that tells me that they're trying to upsell you a service. In other words, they're trying to be your drug provider, and it would probably come at a cost of some kind.
Mhm.
But you, from here on out, you are a CVS SilverScript prescription drug benefit recipient. You can get all your drugs mailed to you, a 90-day supply. You can visit the pharmacy if you'd like, anything like that. So unless, the assisted living facility world is is can be difficult. It would not shock me if the assisted living facility places have like rules like you must use our drug prescription service or you must go
Yeah.
through us. It, it's not ethical, frankly. So
Uh-huh.
I would be cautious of an assisted living facility that says, hey, use our prescription drug service of some kind.
Yes, because they would want to dispense it. Like you couldn't have the mail order sent to your room at the assisted living and you dispense your own
Yeah,
medication.
yeah, that is probably true. I mean, they're going to tack on charges as best they can. So,
Mm.
but
Bonnie, yeah,
Bonnie,
Bonnie.
I think, that needs clarification. The assisted living places that I've heard people have been in, they expect you to take care of yourself and dispense your own medication. Um, and they do not provide aides to help you get in and out. That's a nursing home. If you're in assisted living, and you need extra help, you probably will have to pay for it separately. So the $10,000 a month, whatever they're charging, that includes your room, includes your meal, includes housekeeping, and maybe some other services. But it probably does not include the cost of aides, and it doesn't include anybody dispensing your medication. So, and if you need that, they'll charge you. So, but everyone is different. So you've got to, really read the fine
absolutely.
print.
All right. Before I go, quick reminder about vaccines. Your COVID-19 vaccine, your flu vaccine, and your pneumonia vaccine. You're using your Medicare card for those three vaccines. For RSV, for shingles, for Tdap vaccines, you're using your SilverScript card for those vaccines. That information's on our website, but just keep that in mind. If just keep that Medicare and that SilverScript card with you when you're at the pharmacy getting vaccines, one of them will work for no matter whichever vaccine you need. So just a reminder.
Okay, so Mike's number and extension is in the chat. You can always just call the welfare fund and he'll be very willing to help you. He always is. And if you have a question for Jim you didn't get a chance to ask, just send it to our email address and we will forward it to Jim and I'm sure he'll get back to you as well. And we want to thank you both for a very helpful session. And before we leave, I'm going to make one announcement, and that is the Bell Zeller Scholarship Trust Fund of CUNY fundraiser is tomorrow, Wednesday, the 3rd at 6:30 at John Jay. And if you can't make it, I'm sure they would appreciate if you donated a little bit, and you could do that at the website, at the Bell Zeller Scholarship website. So please do that. Keep that going. Every single penny goes to the scholarships. And I'm sure,
And one
yes.
other announcement that I'm sure Marcia has her hand up for, and
Right,
I
so
will let
that's
her.
the luncheon. We're having our retiree luncheon on January 12th, also at John Jay. There's a new caterer, but we've got a nice menu, and you'll be today or tomorrow or this week you'll be getting an invitation. I'm not exactly sure how you pay. I know you could pay online or you could send a check, correct, Bonnie? Or
Yes, yes, you can pay online or you can send a check. It's much simpler if you pay online.
okay, but
You've
it's
all seen the form already if you've been at a luncheon before.
$25. They're very cheap.
Yes, tell us the date again so everybody can put it in their.
January 12th, Monday, 12 to 3.
We've always have a good time when we go there, and it's very informative as well. Okay, keeps our spirits going. Okay, well, thank you very much for your attendance, and we hope to see you at our next chapter meeting next month. Okay,
Happy holidays, everybody.
happy holidays.